Welcome to the first edition of what is hoped to be of several editions of the Outsider Supplement podcast. The idea is to state reasons for the publication and from time to time have a guest to help sort through some of the items and concepts discussed in the piece. For today's episode, a lot of research exists on the now suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton and his political baggage carried like an albatross around his and the Republican Party's neck. But it had to start somewhere. And with that in mind, and barring any significant omissions, we turn to a great investigative reporter, truly one of, if not the best, in Lauren McGaughy from the Dallas Morning News. And in her piece, she gives a great detailed history of what state crimes Paxton has been accused of and many other things that have gone on with the Paxton saga. So his alleged crimes date back to his time as a state lawmaker. He represented parts of Collin County in the Texas House for 5 terms, or 10 years, before winning a seat in the Texas Senate in November of 2012. He was elected Attorney General 2 years later and then indicted 7 months into his first term. He's charged with 2 first-degree felonies over allegations that he persuaded friends to invest in a McKinney technology company called Servergy Incorporated, without telling them that he received 100,000 shares of stock. His accusers were Byron Cook, who was a Republican state lawmaker until 2019, and Florida businessman Joel Hochberg. Paxton said he intended to invest in Servergy too, but the CEO wouldn't let him, telling Paxton that God doesn't want me to take your money. He's also charged with a third-degree felony, accused of funneling clients to a friend's investment firm without being registered with the state. The Texas State Securities Board reprimanded and fined Paxton $1,000 for his failure to register in 2014. If found guilty, Paxton could face 2 to 10 years in prison for the third-degree felony and 5 to 99 years for each of the first-degree felonies, as well as fines. Now, Paxton pleaded not guilty to all of this and saying everything about this was a partisan attack, really from Cook, who, despite being a Republican, Paxton once called a political adversary. A past spokesman said the registration issue was fully resolved by the Securities Board. And Paxton successfully fought federal civil charges arising from these same allegations, not once, but twice. And we'll get into some other things that he's been accused of. But where the whole thing that has been surrounding Paxton and this fraudulent case is where the case was going to be heard. And so continuing on with the McGaughy piece from the Dallas Morning News, 4 different judges have presided over Paxton's security fraud case in the past 6 years. The first, Collin County District Court Judge Chris Oldner, a Republican, recused himself in 2015. Paxton's lawyers then successfully ousted the next judge, Tarrant County Republican George Gallagher, in May of 2017. Gallagher had just months before ordered the case moved from Collin to Harris County, which was a major blow to the Attorney General. Prosecutors have wanted a venue change, mainly because Paxton is well known in Collin County, and since he won elections there, that the local jury might be biased in his favor. And so they accused Paxton loyalists in North Texas of trying to derail the prosecution, describing the efforts as a crusade on the Attorney General's behalf. After the case was moved, it was randomly assigned to Harris County District Court Judge Robert Johnson, who's a Democrat, in mid-2017. Earlier that month, however, Johnson sided with Paxton's lawyers and ruled the case should go back to Collin County. After Johnson handed Paxton this big victory, Johnson recused himself from the case. The Attorney General's office is now representing Johnson in a lawsuit challenging the region's cash bail system. And Johnson's recusal notice says the judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned if he continued on. Harris County District Court Judge Jason Long, a Democrat, got the case next, but it wasn't to be for all that long here. First, Paxton attempted to remove Long, arguing he too was being represented by the Attorney General's office in the same bail case. However, the court found that Long, the 4th judge to preside over the case, didn't need to step down. So prosecutors appealed Johnson's decision to move the case back to Collin County July of 2020. And at the end of the month, the first Court of Appeals in Harris County abated Johnson's ruling, giving Luong a chance to revisit his decision. In October, Luong agreed with his predecessor in Paxton that the case should be moved back to Collin County. But the prosecutors quickly moved to halt that decision, and so wanting the full court to really weigh in. And so this has been a little back and forth of where does this thing go? It's been a consistent back and forth, and it's been really frustrating because this has been going on for nearly 8 years. Well, last month, in June, the highest criminal court in Texas, the Criminal Court of Appeals, issued a ruling on this issue. And we turn to one of the really good writers in the state, one of the best reporters in James Baragán from the Texas Tribune on this story, where he says the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, in a 6-3 ruling, overturned lower court decisions that said Paxton's trial had been improperly moved from Collin County, where he lives, to Harris County, because the trial judge had lost jurisdiction over the matter. However, the Texas Constitution and state law protected the judge's authority over the case, the court ruled. So what that means is that this case is going to be heard, and it's going to be heard in Houston. After an 8-year saga, a complete drama of where the case will be heard, it's finally reached an endpoint, and it will finally be heard in Houston. So that kind of puts a bow on the Paxton drama over the fraud case, dealing with where that will be heard and what will take place then. So now that we dealt with the fraud case and where that's going to be heard, then in 2020 came his other issue with real estate agent and political donor Nate Paul. The $3.3 million settlement of his case with those from his office, and then asking the legislature to budget it for his office to pay the settlement, is what led to his impeachment. The investigative report explicitly read that if he did not ask for the money, there would have been no investigation, ergo no impeachment. Paxton brought all of this onto himself. Make no mistake about it. And now suspended Attorney General Paxton awaits his impeachment trial, in which he said he won't testify. And sometime soon, there will be his securities fraud trial in Houston. If there's anybody who wishes that this year would end as quickly as possible, it has to be Ken Paxton. Now, all of these things that have been lining up against Paxton, he still has his hardcore set of supporters. I mean, let's face the fact that he did win a statewide election not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the fraud case, all of those. And then in 2020, dealing with the issue with Nate Paul, the whistleblower issue, the FBI investigation, the adultery case, all those things are in one issue. They all are wrapped up in one thing. And they happened in 2020, leading up to the 2021 session, where he got pretty much a verbal admonishment from the Senate to say, you shouldn't do this, and asking for money from a settlement and all this sort of stuff. But let's be clear. The argument that you often hear is, well, the voters wanted him. Well, that's not a bad argument. But let's also be clear about this. The $3.3 million that was settled in his whistleblower case, he wanted the legislature to fund that for his office to pay. And that's where all this came from. But what you're going to hear is a lot of pushback from grassroots Republicans. And it's going to revolve around the process. They argue it was rushed and Paxton could not testify. And that's kind of what you hear a lot about. Well, Paxton couldn't testify. Well, we need to understand a few things before answering those criticisms. One, is the Texas legislature is part-time citizen-led. It's like ultra part-time, because when you look at the size of Texas in both population and in geographical size, this is a huge state. It's the second largest in both size and population. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. And it's the only state of this size that meets in this sort of biennial manner. So that's why I have said it's like an ultra part-time because of its size, and it meets in odd-numbered years for 140 days. So they start on the second Tuesday in January, and they go till around Memorial Day. So let's be honest about this. It's not like Congress, which is full-time and can carry an investigation for weeks on end. The Texas House needed 3 full months of intense investigation. So arguing this investigation and the impeachment was rushed is as bad as an argument as saying that bills passed in the legislature are no good because the lawmaking process was rushed. It makes no sense. Two is the lack of testimony from Ken Paxton. Because you'll hear people say, well, he wasn't able to testify in that grand jury. He wasn't able to testify in that hearing. He wasn't able to testify. Well, a good comparison to impeachment is an indictment. That's what it is. An impeachment is where the House of Representatives brings charges against somebody in either the executive branch or even the judicial branch. So it's more or less an indictment, because when you think about what an indictment just is handed down by a grand jury to say there's enough evidence for this to go to trial. So it would be fair to ask those who complain about Paxton not testifying if they knew anyone under investigation who testified before a grand jury. They would not, because it does not happen. And that's what needs to be understood. Third thing here is that the arguments are old, and the voters knew about all of this. And that all this whole thing here is simply trying to violate the will of the people, that this is nothing more than a stunt to dismiss the will of the people. Well, that would be so if Paxton didn't ask the legislature to fund his $3.3 million settlement with the whistleblowers. Okay? But because he did, that makes everything current. So that needs to be very much at the forefront. This isn't old stuff. If he didn't ask the legislature to fund his $3.3 million settlement, this would not be happening. And then finally here, there's another argument that's often heard, and it's even brought forward in a tweet by Senator Ted Cruz as to how great of an Attorney General Ken Paxton has been, and that he should not be impeached due to his excellent job performance. Well, look, impeachment has nothing to do with the merits of the job, and the junior senator should know that. Impeachment is the ultimate check of an elected official who broke public trust, and there are many Republicans, especially in the Texas House, who agree that he has broken such trust. When hearing those arguments as to why he should not be impeached, remember the counter-arguments and basically just decide for yourself. But all in all here, the ball rests with the Senate, because that's where the trial is going to happen. So the Senate will transform into a courtroom of impeachment. And in my written piece, I actually give you the direct quote from the Texas Constitution about what will happen there. You'll have the House be the prosecution, Paxton's attorneys will be the defense, the Senate is the jury, and the presiding officer is the lieutenant governor. And since this is going to happen in the Senate, the lieutenant governor and the senators get to set how the trial works. And so they get to set rules for this. And so while the Senate has adopted its rules for the September trial, and part of those rules was to have the suspended attorney general testify, Paxton said he would not. He said just about a week ago that he's not going to participate in this, and attorney, Tony Busby, has said, we're not going to give this any sort of credence. We're not going to justify this sham and illegal thing. And, they like to throw out these words. But all this throws a wrench into just about everything because the Senate is the one holding the trial. And you have to think that if the Senate wants Paxton to testify, they'll get him to testify. Okay? Even if they have to delay it, even like another week to make sure he's there, and if they have to hold him hostage or whatever the case may be, if the Senate wants him there, I have a good feeling that it will get him. Now, one other little curveball in all of this is Paxton's wife, Angela Paxton. I said, well, what's she's got to do with anything? Well, she's a state senator. And when the Senate adopted its rules, it made probably the best compromise that it could. It made her essentially powerless. She's part of the official count, but she can't really do anything else. So, when it comes to deliberation, when it comes to really the big things, there will be times when she will be on the outside looking in, especially when it matters. Because, they're going, they adopted a rule that said that they can't talk about this with anybody who's not in the jury. And if you're living with somebody who's part of this, do you not think that they wouldn't talk about it? Like if Ken Paxton and his wife Angela were saying, having some dinner or having a, whatever that they have, and say, hey, what'd you talk about today? Do you think that she would honor her oath to abide by the Senate rules, or do you think she'd help out her husband? I think we know the answer to that question. But the question comes if Paxton will receive the necessary 2/3 majority vote to be convicted of impeachment, hence removed from office and barred from holding any state public office again. With the 2/3 of 31 equating to 21, this will actually be a pretty difficult thing to do. And quite honestly, it should be. And if we're honest, if we're even more honest, this should be a no-brainer. The evidence brought to trial is clear and it's damning. The Senate, acting as jurors in this capacity, should vote nearly unanimous to convict him. But that's my take. And that's why we have a trial. Hopefully, senators will have a clear judgment of the facts and the law and put Texas and public trust above party. Thanks for tuning in to this supplement recording to my written piece. Do not hesitate to share this with as many people as you would like. All right. Hit that subscribe button and always look for another publication and supplemental post next week. I'm going to try to do both of these once a week for you. This supplemental piece is brought to you by the Mediocre Movie Club. The Mediocre Movie Club is a set of what they call idiots who give mediocre reviews to very good to not so great movies and TV shows. And you can check out the Mediocre Movie Club at www.mediocremovie.club. That's mediocremovie.club. You can find the Mediocre Movie Club on Facebook. You can like them on Facebook. You can follow them on Twitter. It's also on Instagram. And it will soon be on Threads. I'm Drew Landry, and I am the author of The Outsider, and this is the first of many editions here of this supplemental piece. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Threads. I'm right there, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.